All right, buckle up for a deep dive into a really wild theory. This time, it's all thanks to you.
Oh, is that right?
You bet. You sent us excerpts from Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler, and let me tell you, this book goes places.
I'm intrigued. What's the gist?
Well, it basically throws out the whole Hitler die in the bunker thing.
Okay, that's a pretty big claim right off the bat.
It is. Instead, the book lays out this scenario where he escapes and ends up living out his days in Argentina.
Argentina, huh? That's interesting.
And we're talking the whole 9 yards, chapters, prefaces, even photo captions, all painting this picture of secret U-boat missions, hidden Nazi fortunes, even potential Hitler sightings in South America.
Wow, that's quite the rabbit hole. So what's the mission for this deep dive? Are we trying to debunk this, or?
The real question is for you, the listener. Could any of this be true? Let's dive into what you sent us and see what we find.
All right, let's do it.
So, to kick things off, the authors, Simon Dunstan and Gerard Williams, they're not exactly shy about challenging conventional wisdom.
Right, going up against the whole Hitler committed suicide in the bunker narrative, that's a pretty established historical event.
You said it.
But they do acknowledge that that's the common belief. What they point out is that there's no definitive proof.
It's a bold move to challenge such a widely accepted event.
For sure. And they don't stop there. The authors highlight that the FBI kept investigating reported Hitler sightings well into the 1960s.
Wait, the FBI was still chasing down Hitler rumors decades after the war?
Apparently so. Imagine that, they're still looking into this stuff.
Wow.
And get this, many of those FBI files, especially the ones from Argentina, they're still classified.
Hold up, classified files on Hitler sightings.
You got it.
Why keep that stuff secret if there's nothing to it? It makes you wonder.
Yeah, it makes you think maybe there's something more to the story.
You also have to think about the context. We're talking about the end of World War II, Berlin's in chaos, the Soviets are closing in. It wouldn't have been impossible for someone to vanish, especially if they had the right resources and connections.
Yeah. No doubt. Especially in a place like Argentina, with its large German community and all that vast open space.
And according to the book, that's exactly where they were headed.
Right. There's this plan, the book details, called Action Feuerland. It was supposedly the Nazis' plan to set up a post-war haven in Argentina for Hitler and all the key players.
Action Feuerland sounds straight out of a spy thriller. What exactly did this plan involve?
Well, the book goes into this whole web of financial schemes.
Okay, financial schemes, that's interesting.
Think looted wealth from all those occupied nations funneled through neutral countries. Switzerland, for instance.
Oh, like money laundering on a massive scale.
Exactly. Shell corporations, numbered bank accounts, the works. Anything to make that money untraceable.
So a whole shadow financial system propping up this escape route.
Right.
If the Nazis had that kind of money behind them, it's not so crazy to think they could have pulled something like this off.
Right. It's a thought-provoking idea, especially when you consider the claims that even some prominent Americans might have been involved.
Americans helping the Nazis. That's a pretty unsettling thought.
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer to the whole thing.
So this Action Feuerland was clearly a pretty sophisticated operation. Who are the key players making all this happen?
Well, one name that pops up is Ludwig Freud.
Ludwig Freud, who was he?
A German industrialist, pretty powerful guy. He had close ties to both Argentina and a certain Juan Perón.
Oh, yeah, Juan Perón. He went on to be president of Argentina, right?
Exactly. But back then, he was a rising star in the military. Freud, he was instrumental in helping Nazis escape and then blend into Argentine society.
So we're not just talking about a couple of guys on the run. This was a highly coordinated operation.
That's the picture the book paints. And then there's the U-boat angle, which you mentioned earlier. The excerpts you sent talk about U-boats ferrying Nazis and their loot all the way to South America.
Right, that's a whole other level of crazy.
It is. The book focuses on this group called Gruppen Seewolf, a U-boat wolf pack supposedly tasked with getting Hitler and others to Argentina. Lots of secrecy surrounding their missions.
I can imagine. Trying to cross the Atlantic in a U-boat, especially in the final days of the war, that had to be incredibly risky. Were those voyages even possible, given how tightly the Allies controlled the Atlantic?
That's one of the big points of debate. But the book suggests that the Nazis had advanced tech, like the schnorkel.
The schnorkel?
Yeah, basically it's a breathing tube for the submarine. Lets the U-boat taken air for the engines and the crew while it stays underwater,
Ah, I see.
extended their range and made them harder to detect.
So with that kind of technology, a transatlantic journey becomes a bit more plausible.
Maybe, but the book goes even further. It gives specific dates and locations for supposed U-boat landings in Argentina. Some of them even backed up by eyewitness accounts.
Eyewitnesses.
Yep. There's this really interesting story about an Argentine police officer who intercepts a German signaler on the coast,
A German signaler doing what?
sending messages, presumably to the U-boats, but then the officer gets orders from higher-ups to stand down.
That sounds more like a cover-up than just a mix-up.
It certainly raises some eyebrows. And it ties into this whole other aspect of the war that was going on at the same time.
Yeah.
The Allied intelligence efforts.
Right. Like those special units they always show in the movies.
Exactly. Units like 30 Advance Unit. Their job was to capture enemy tech and documents.
High-stakes stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were particularly interested in any German advancements in things like nuclear physics. Just imagine if the Nazis had gotten the atomic bomb first.
Don't even want to think about that.
The book also goes into Allied initiatives, like the Alsos mission, which was all about securing German scientific advancements. Sometimes they resorted to pretty drastic measures.
Like what?
Kidnappings, even assassinations of leading German scientists.
Wow, a secret war for technological dominance happening right alongside the main conflict.
Exactly. It was a complicated time, a lot of blurred lines. The book even brings up figures like Allen Dulles,
Allen Dulles, the guy who later ran the CIA?
the one and only. While he was definitely committed to beating the Nazis, he was also worried about Soviet ambitions.
Makes sense. The Cold War was already brewing.
Right. So it's possible that Dulles might have been open to cutting deals with certain German factions to gain an advantage against the Soviets.
That's fascinating. So even within the Allied forces, there were competing agendas at play. But what about Hitler himself? What does the book say about his life in Argentina, assuming he made it there?
It's a pretty interesting picture. According to the book, he was living in the shadows, going by different names and moving from place to place.
A far cry from his days as the Führer.
You could say that. Essentially, he was a ghost of his former self. But apparently, he did have at least one spot that sounds pretty luxurious.
Oh. Tell me more.
It's a place called Inalco. The book describes it as a mansion in Patagonia. Apparently, it was kind of like a smaller version of his Berghof in the Bavarian Alps.
So even in exile, he managed to find a little slice of paradise.
It seems that way. But according to the book, he wasn't completely isolated. Hitler supposedly continued meeting with other escaped Nazis. They might have even been scheming to revive the Nazi movement.
Even in defeat, he couldn't let go of his ambitions. Chilling to think about. Does the book offer any specific details about these meetings or collaborations?
It does mention a few things. For instance, there's an account from a housemaid named Catalina Gomero. She claims to have served Hitler breakfast at a house in La Falda.
Someone claims to have seen Hitler having breakfast. You can't make this stuff up.
I know, right? And then there's a story of Hernan Anson. He says he saw Hitler, and Eva Braun in Mar del Plata says he recognized Hitler even without the mustache.
Wow. But how much can we really trust these eyewitness accounts? Memories can be pretty unreliable, right?
That's true. There's always a chance of embellishment or mistaken identity.
But then again, the book does cite actual FBI reports of Hitler sightings in Argentina. If the U.S. government was taking these claims seriously, that lends them some credibility.
It does add another layer of intrigue to the whole thing.
This whole gray wolf story is becoming quite the puzzle. It's incredible to think that such a pivotal event, Hitler's death, could still be shrouded in so much mystery.
It is pretty remarkable. I think it speaks to the lasting power of secrets and the enduring fascination with one of history's most notorious figures. It really is remarkable. And the financial aspect of all of this. Action Feuerland, you shared some excerpts about how they financed this whole alleged escape. The scale is mind-boggling.
It's hard to wrap your head around it. The Nazis looted entire countries. We're talking a fortune in gold, artwork, who knows what else. The scale of the theft is almost impossible to comprehend.
It's crucial to remember that at its core, the Nazi Party was a criminal enterprise, manipulating financial systems. They were experts.
They certainly weren't shy about taking what they wanted.
Nope, not at all. Remember the Dawes Plan from back in the 1920s? The one meant to help Germany rebuild after World War I?
Vaguely.
Well, the book explains how the Nazis actually used those loans to fuel their rearmament efforts. They were playing the long game, even back then.
So they were already thinking that far ahead.
Absolutely. And as they consolidated power, They systematically stripped Jewish citizens of their wealth. Legal loopholes, outright theft, you name it. All those assets went straight into the Nazi Party's coffers.
It's chilling. A system designed to help a nation recover, twisted to fuel a regime built on hate and violence.
It's a dark chapter for sure. And figures like Hermann Goering, the book highlights how he personally profited from all this. Vast art collections, enriched himself through those forced atonement payments from Jewish communities.
It's sickening, lining their own pockets while committing horrific acts.
The book then goes on to describe how the regime created this whole intricate web of financial institutions and schemes, all to manage and conceal the looted wealth. One key player, the Bank for International Settlements based in Switzerland.
Wait, the Bank for International Settlements, isn't that supposed to be like a force for good in the financial world?
It is, which is what makes its role in all of this even more unsettling. This institution, it was created to oversee German reparation payments after World War I. But it ended up becoming a tool for the Nazis to launder money and finance their war effort.
So even institutions meant to be neutral got caught up in this web. Makes you wonder who else might have been complicit, maybe even without knowing it.
It's a sobering thought. Even the most well-intentioned systems can be manipulated.
Earlier, you mentioned the book claims there was American involvement, too. Can you tell us more about that?
The book discusses American corporations, individuals, continuing to do business with Nazi Germany, even after the war started. Some might have been naive, others driven by greed, but...
So you're saying American companies were knowingly supporting the Nazi war machine?
It appears so in certain cases.
Yep.
The book specifically calls out Allen Dulles, later head of the CIA. He was, of course, ultimately dedicated to defeating the Nazis, but he also had these close ties to German industrialists. Perhaps he saw an opportunity to make some alliances there, maybe a way to counter Soviet influence down the line.
So even while fighting one world war, the groundwork for the next one was already being laid.
It was a complicated time. Enemy, ally, those lines were getting blurred. History is rarely black and white.
That's for sure. Now, the book points to Martin Bormann, Hitler's right-hand man, as the real mastermind behind Action Feuerland. Was he the one who actually set this escape plan into motion?
That's how the book portrays him. Cunning, ruthless, a master manipulator, consolidating power, even as the Third Reich crumbled around him.
He seems like quite a character.
He was a complex figure, that's for sure. The book argues that Bormann understood. Survival depended on securing their wealth, finding a safe haven.
And that's where Argentina comes in.
Exactly. Large German community, a government sympathetic to their cause, and all that vast, empty land. Perfect for disappearing.
It does sound like the ideal place to go off the grid.
The book suggests Bormann used everything. Bribery, threats, manipulation, you name it. All to secure the cooperation of key Argentine figures, including Juan Perón.
Perón, the future president.
The one and only. At the time, he was this rising star in the military. Ambitious, and as the book highlights, willing to exploit the situation for his own gain. He saw aligning himself with the Nazi regime as a path to power and wealth.
A stark reminder that personal ambition can outweigh any moral compass, even in the face of atrocities.
It's a disturbing but important point. The book also describes how Bormann created this shadowy financial network. Shell corporations, numbered accounts, moving Nazi assets out of Germany into safe havens. Argentina being a prime destination.
Setting up a parallel financial system to support the escape and the survival of these key Nazi figures.
Exactly. The book calls it the organization, claims it operated long after the war, managing the hidden Nazi wealth, ensuring their influence in Argentina, and who knows where else.
A secret network operating in the shadows, pulling strings, shaping global events. Sounds like something straight out of a spy novel.
It's both fascinating and deeply unsettling.
Okay, so we've got the escape plan, the money trail, the key players. But what about the escape itself? How did Hitler and these other top Nazis actually get out of Berlin as the Soviets were closing in?
According to the book, it was a desperate scramble, a daring operation, all playing out as Soviet forces were literally at the gates of Berlin. They paint a picture of chaos, confusion, the city under constant bombardment, everyone fighting for survival.
I can only imagine the terror and uncertainty.
Amidst all that, the book says Bormann orchestrated this plan to get Hitler, Eva Braun, and a select few others out. They supposedly used a network of secret tunnels and safe houses, trying to stay one step ahead of the Soviets.
A real-life Great Escape scenario,
Oh.
but with even higher stakes.
Exactly.
Much higher stakes.
So they're moving through these secret tunnels, trying to evade capture. What happened next? Did they actually make it out of Berlin?
The book claims they did. They describe a clandestine flight from Berlin to a remote spot in Denmark. A secret flight out of Berlin, with Allied planes everywhere. That must have been incredibly dangerous.
It was. The book talks about loyal pilots, a whole network of informants, all working to avoid Allied patrols.
So they get to Denmark. But how did they get from there to Argentina?
That's where the U-boats come back in. The book claims Hitler and his entourage were transferred to U-boats in Denmark, and from there, they made the journey to Argentina.
Crossing the Atlantic in a U-boat in the closing days of the war. That just seems incredibly dangerous.
It does. It's a claim that's met with a lot of skepticism.
I can understand why. But the authors seem convinced. They believe the Nazis had the motive and the means to pull it off.
The chaos of war, the Nazis' resources, their sheer determination, they argue that all of that created a small window of opportunity for this audacious escape.
Okay, so let's say, just for argument's sake, that Hitler did make it to Argentina. What was life like for him there, according to the book? Did he live openly or stay hidden?
The book describes a secluded life, moving between locations, assuming new identities. Essentially, a ghost, living in the shadows of his former self.
Hard to imagine someone who craved the spotlight so much choosing to live like that.
It is. But maybe that was the price of survival. The book mentions this place called Inalco.
Inalco?
Yeah, a luxurious mansion in Patagonia, very reminiscent of his Berghof in the Alps. Seems even in exile, he tried to recapture some of what he'd lost.
A mansion in Patagonia, not exactly roughing it.
True, but the book suggests he wasn't completely alone. Hitler continued meeting with other escaped Nazis, maybe even plotting a comeback.
Even in defeat, couldn't let go of his ideology.
It seems that way. According to the book, the Grey Wolf never really went away.
What about Eva Braun? Was she with him in Argentina?
The book says yes, at least at first. Describes her struggling to adapt to this new life, far removed from the power and glamour she was used to.
I imagine that would be a tough adjustment.
For sure. But the book also suggests that Eva Braun eventually left Hitler, relocated with her daughters to a quieter life in Neukölln.
So even their relationship couldn't survive exile and a life in hiding.
That's what the book indicates.
But maybe the most intriguing character in all of this is Martin Bormann. You described him as a master manipulator. Does the book say what he was up to in Argentina?
It does. Claims he remained a key player, managing the Nazis' hidden assets, orchestrating their activities. Used his financial skills and ruthlessness to rebuild the network, ensure their survival, and continued influence.
So he was essentially the mastermind behind their post-war operation.
That's what the book argues. It claims he had close ties to Juan Perón, who is now president of Argentina, used those connections to protect the escaped Nazis, advance their agenda.
It's disturbing to think that a network of Nazis could operate so openly in a place like Argentina.
It is. But remember, this is all based on the claims made in the book.
Right, of course. But if it's true, it really changes our understanding of the post-war world.
It does. And it raises important questions about how much we really know about this period in history.
So we've got the escape plan, the money, the U-boat journeys, life in Argentina. But what about the end? What happened to Hitler, Eva Braun, Martin Bormann?
That's where it gets even more intriguing. The book claims Hitler died in Argentina in 1962. They say his body was buried somewhere secret, which just adds to the mystery.
Even in death, shrouded in secrecy.
Seems that way. As for Eva Braun, the book says she lived a quiet life in Neukölln with her daughters until her own death.
And Bormann?
The book claims he remained active in the Nazi network, managing their finances, plotting a resurgence. But his ultimate fate, that remains a mystery. Some say he escaped to South America, others think he was captured or killed by the Soviets.
So even the ending is full of unanswered questions.
It is, and that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It challenges our assumptions about history, makes us wonder if there's more to the story than we've been told.
I have to admit, when we started this deep dive, I was pretty skeptical about the whole gray wolf theory. But the more we dig into the details, the more intriguing it becomes.
I understand your skepticism. It's a story that stretches the imagination. But the Nazis were capable of extraordinary things, both good and evil.
And the book does present compelling evidence, even if it's circumstantial. The eyewitness accounts, the FBI reports, the documented Nazi presence in Argentina, it adds up to a very interesting, if unsettling, picture.
Raises more questions than it answers. But that's often the case with historical mysteries.
Out of curiosity, what struck you as the most interesting part of all of this? The escape itself? The financial maneuvering? Something else entirely?
What I find most fascinating is that even if we dismiss the idea of Hitler living in Argentina, the story of Action Feuerland still tells us a lot about the aftermath of World War II.
What do you mean?
It shines a light on the complexities of that period, the moral compromises, the blurred lines between victors and vanquished.
It's a reminder that history is rarely straightforward. Always hidden agendas, competing narratives, secrets that linger long after the events themselves.
Exactly. And that's a valuable lesson, not just for understanding history, but for understanding the world today.
I completely agree. We should always be questioning, always seeking new information, always open to the possibility that there's more to the story than we initially thought.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, the book goes into some specific details about the lives of those who supposedly escaped.
Oh, right. Beyond the grand historical narrative, it gets into the more personal aspects of their experiences.
Exactly. For instance, there's this claim that Hitler and Eva Braun actually had a daughter together. She was smuggled out of Germany and raised in Argentina.
Hold on, a daughter? That's a pretty big bombshell.
It is. The book calls her Usi. Says she was born in Italy in 1938 and brought to Argentina after the war.
It's incredible to think about the impact that kind of secret would have on someone's life.
Absolutely. It adds another layer of complexity to this whole tangled story.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about people, their relationships, the hidden consequences of their actions.
That's a great point. It's the human element that makes these stories so compelling, even when we question whether they're actually true.
Absolutely. And I think it's that human element that makes the whole gray wolf theory so captivating. It's not just about a dictator escaping justice. It's about disrupted lives, families torn apart, and secrets that echo through generations.
It's a powerful reminder that the past never really goes away. It shapes the present in ways we might not even realize.
Well, that's certainly a lot to think about. This gray wolf deep dive has been quite the eye-opener.
It has. And it just goes to show the importance of staying curious, skeptical, and open to new information.
Couldn't agree more. There's always more to learn, more to uncover, more to question. It's been quite the journey, that's for sure. I gotta say, I came into this thinking, okay, Hitler escaping. How believable can this really be? But the book, it does weave this narrative together pretty effectively. I can see why some people might buy into it.
It's a well-constructed narrative, that's for sure. And even if we take it with a grain of salt, it does make you think about history, about the power of belief, about why these conspiracy theories stick around.
That's a really good point. This goes way beyond just, did Hitler escape or not?
Yeah.
It makes you question how we understand the past, how easily those stories we tell ourselves can be challenged or changed.
Exactly. History's not always a neat and tidy package. It's messy, it's full of contradictions, there's room for different interpretations.
So for you listening, what was the most intriguing part of this Grey Wolf deep dive? Did anything really stand out, maybe even inspire you to do a little more research on your own?
Thinking about the lasting impact of World War II, how it still shapes our world today, that's what I find most fascinating. This gray wolf theory, whether it's true or not, makes us confront just how complicated that period was, and all the unanswered questions that still linger.
And it underscores how important it is to think critically, to question what we're told, to look at things from different angles.
Absolutely. Never be afraid to challenge the accepted narrative, to dig a little deeper, to search for the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's hard to find.
It's been fantastic diving into this material with you. And to everyone listening, thank you for sharing these excerpts, for giving us a chance to explore this alternative history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those deep dives coming.